Chancellor Merkel. Thank you very much for being with us.
I will speak in German, so perhaps you wish to put your headsets on. Mr. Kulau, Mr. Schulte-Bockum, colleagues, fellow members of Parliament, Madam State Secretary, ladies and gentlemen. I gladly accepted your invitation to participate in the opening ceremony of this conference here, because first I must say that Channel 2, can you hear me now? Can you hear the English translation? Very well. No, only Mr. Kulau's device isn't working. All of the others can manage. Well, maybe you ought to learn more German then. But the first sentence was already very good. So, first, the theme, Digitising Europe, is certainly the right theme that you picked, which is why I like to come here. And that's something that really spurs us on, and the whole of the federal government, because we're more than aware of the fact that we as Europeans are lagging behind in several areas, from the capacity to produce chips to the capacity to actually come up with new search engines in the internet. We have actually lost ground, and I think now is the real time, the real moment to where the real economy merges with the digital world to make a forceful effort. What Mr. Kulau just now mentioned, this Industry 4.0, that is the right moment for us to really try to fill that gap and to grow into this Internet of Things market. This is not only an opportunity, it is a need, a necessity, because if we're unable to do this now, we Europeans as a whole will fall behind in international competition. For Germany, this is even more true than for others, because after all, we have a 20% share of industry in the value added of our GDP. And if others overtake us and in the digital world and are also able to then at a certain point in time keep up with us in the real economy part of the matter, then we will lose even more ground in as regards our competitive edge, which is why we are trying to do our utmost to push as a government for the right course. So you haven't only picked the right theme, you also picked the right place, because Berlin stands for change. Only a few days ago, we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. We see what has grown up in the meantime, ever since the wall fell. We've seen the number of young startups, the creative scene of Berlin that has developed immensely. Berlin no longer has that much of an industrial base, but it does have a very promising startup scene, and they have obviously to be supported. So one of the questions that the federal government has asked itself is, how can we create even better framework condition for young people to set up startups? I must say that the culture for venture capital, for actually investing in small companies, is not as highly developed in our country as it should be. So right now we're trying to create tax breaks at a European level too. I think we need to address possibilities of giving tax breaks without them being qualified immediately as state aid. And what we're also doing is we talk to those who already have experience in providing venture capital. How can we change this culture? The politicians alone cannot do this, but we can give a necessary contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, the federal government, because this issue is deemed so important and so urgent, has adopted a digital agenda that will be applicable from 2014 to 2017, that is to say, our legislative term, and it covers the whole range of those issues that create the necessary ground in order to improve the infrastructure, but also improve the legal framework that will then be conducive to building up a true digital economy. For a number of years, we already have the established practice of the National IT Summit. There are a lot of working groups that work on developing the necessary regulatory measures, but where the companies too commit themselves to doing their bit. Perhaps it's one characteristic feature of the digital world that very new forms of cooperation have emerged. Normally what we do is we go to the annual meeting of the associations of industry, we criticize them, they criticize us, and it's, if you like, well, an established but rather bloodless process. But this IT summit actually is a year-long event where there are always instances of very good cooperation, very fruitful cooperation between the different, among the different stakeholders that all do their bit in order to bring the matter forward. But what we know and what we feel is that digitization certainly cannot be promoted nationally. We need the advantages of the European single market. So you again picked the right theme. Europe will not be able to go it alone if it wishes to hold its own in the global competition. As regards, for example, handling personal data, I think here we are highly sensitive in Europe, and this sensitivity needs to be brought into the process so that we can develop new and interesting products that perhaps others are not able to produce. But in order to be successful globally, we have to do something. We cannot simply put the brakes on. That will not bring Europe forward. We have to look at the chances, at the opportunities, and at the risks, and not only at the risks. And because then we will allow others in the world to use those opportunities, and we will lag behind. That would be a huge mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very glad that Germany in the new Commission also has a commissioner for a digital economy, a German commissioner, because we need clear regulation, and we also need a clear playing field as regards investments. I want to mention two examples here: the package that deals with the digital single market, and also the data protection regulation that will decide how we deal with big data in a responsible way. As to the package on the digital market, it's taken us quite a long time, and not because of Nelly Kroes's shortcomings, not at all. It was very much because of the member states simply took far too long to come to an agreement. This is about roaming fees, obviously. This is about cross-border management of certain frequencies, and also about the important issue of net neutrality. Here the government has forged a joint position. It's taken us again a little bit of time, because there are two things here that are important. First, free and accessible internet, but also an internet that is innovation friendly. What does that mean, innovation friendly? Well, that means that there has to be a certain security for special services, and these special services will increase after all. And they can only develop if you have predictable quality standards available. These two sides have to be reconciled, and I think that gradually in our negotiations in Brussels we will be able to do that. We're actually trying to speed up this process. I mean, think of the driverless automobile, for example, or telemedicine and the related services. Obviously, you need secure data and secure transmission of data, otherwise you cannot use these applications. So we need both. We need a free and accessible internet, and we also need a secure internet and qualitatively secure internet for all of these other ambitious services. Now, another important point, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, is broadband expansion. We don't even need to raise net neutrality if we don't have the necessary capacity in the net. I would say even when you have 50 megabit per second, it's still difficult to sort of split this up. We need a much broader bandwidth, but we also need more reliable internet structure in the rural areas, in remote areas. And here, at least from a German vantage point, this is a completely new phenomenon, because what we labeled provisions, sort of services for general provision, we always guaranteed by the state. For example, sewage treatment, electricity connections. Today, we work with the private industry in order for them to provide broadband for each and every household, knowing full well that it is not commercially viable to provide that for each and every household, but for somebody who lives in a remote area, that person too needs to have access to the internet if we don't want to have an even stronger rural exodus, which is not what we want. 50% of people in Germany live in rural areas, and we wish to keep it that way. So, we have very good initiatives on building up this broadband, particularly in conurbations in big cities, but we have more difficulty doing that in rural areas. Thank God there are a lot of technical offers now on the market which can be used and ought to be used. We're preparing the auctioning right now of the 700 megahertz frequencies. The auctioning is to be shaped in such a way that the revenue will then be used in a way for that the priority is here on building up broadband in rural areas, and the dividend then will be used for building up the necessary infrastructure. So now we have to speed up this internet auctioning process. I can give you the good news. We've made progress in cooperation with the lender in this particular respect, and I think we're on the right track here. Broadband expansion as a whole is dealt with in the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure according to the so-called Kursbuch-Netzausbau, a master plan for network expansion. It's continuously under discussion, and I do hope and trust that what we intend to do, namely to have 700 to have the necessary bits per second for each and every one accessible by this time will be achieved. At this point in time, obviously, we need an even wider bandwidth. Now, third point, the telecommunications package in Europe. I already talked about a broadband expansion. That's something we need to talk about. This infrastructure package that Jean-Claude Juncker suggested will also help in building up the digital infrastructure. And what's important now is to look at individual and concrete projects so that Europe becomes more visible in this particular respect. Now, the third point is this overall regulation on data protection. So the important point here will be how a value added in big data management can work in Europe. It is a fairly complex issue, and we have to be very careful that what we call data mining does not only happen outside of Europe, but can also happen in Europe. Which brings me to precisely the point. I think we shall be able to come quite quickly to an agreement on how to process anonymous data. But there are quite a lot of people who obviously need tailor-made applications, and it will be very important to be very astute in creating the necessary framework conditions so that those people who wish to protect their personal data can do so, but at the same time it's not rendered impossible to develop interesting applications and actually sell them on the European market. Security aspects are another very important point. Cyber attacks, both in our country and abroad, have become a daily reality, and we shouldn't close our eyes with regard to this threat. We need to come up with a reasonable and credible answer to this, and we need to protect critical infrastructure. The world today knows quite different forms of possible access and attack. But again, this mustn't be just the dominant issue, protection against risks, but we always need to be aware of the opportunities. Why is this so important? If we look at the growth rates in Europe, they are fairly low. If we look at the unemployment rates, where are they highest? Well, among the young people in Europe, and a continent where you have so many countries where 30 and 40% of young people do not have a job, is not a continent that is promising for young people, not promising for the future. Obviously, help given by the state can help, but it can only ever be such a bridge into a possible employment possibility. But where will those new jobs be created, ladies and gentlemen? The hope that Europe can actually find jobs we don't have now in the chemical industry, in mechanical engineering, and in the automotive sector alone may well be a fallacy, because 90% of growth in the world today is generated outside of Europe. So the digital economy is certainly a great engine for growth and jobs in Europe, which is why startups have to be able, which is why people need to be able to set up startups fairly simply. It would be the best thing if we have a level playing field for startups throughout the whole of the European Union. There have to be transparent possibilities for promoting this, the right kind of training, the right kind of education at both technical colleges and universities, and also professional and vocational schools, so that digital applications, but also Industry 4.0 becomes something that everyone knows about. So again, I am grateful to Mr. Colau that he pointed out the importance of education, and we need to do this together. It starts in the schools. It needs to be promoted. Prosperity of Europe requires a positive attitude towards the technical possibilities of the digital world, because far more jobs will be created in this particular industry than will fall away due to the introduction of digitization, the real economy. And trying to give a boost to this kind of optimistic spirit is inordinately important. We have to demonstrate this time and again at various levels. Research will play a central role in all this. Ever since 2005, we have increased our research expenditure by 60%. We're close to 3% of GDP, a target we set up for ourselves. 2/3 come from the business community, 1/3 from the political side. And we will continue to pursue this course. Industry 4.0 plays, again, a very important role in research. We shall see to it that the European research program Horizon 2020 attaches also great importance to that particular area. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you yet again for having this conference here in Berlin. I wish you fruitful discussions. And if you want to do us a favor as politicians, please come up with results that are for us simple to understand, so that we know what to do and to create the necessary conditions, so that the weakness in growth of Europe that we currently have may then turn into a more promising growth-friendly climate. Thank you very much.